Hello. I wanted to take a moment to weigh in on the recent shooting that happened over in Sandy Hook. I feel that this is important to talk about. There certainly seems to be a lot of passionate feelings on both sides of this issue, particularly relating to gun control. My own personal feelings on the matter is I don't agree with gun control, and it's not because I really am a real avid firearms collector or user. It's just that, in accordance with the research that I've done, uh, it doesn't really look to me like that's the right place to be focusing. And when I say this, I want to make it clear that for those people out there that do strongly believe in gun control, I think that for the most part you are caring, well-meaning people. You would like to be able to see this not happen in the future, and so would I. My point of contention, though, is that I can see other things that are contributing to pushing someone to go on one of these shooting sprees, and it's not the weapon. And the argument can be made that it's the tool that they're using, and that's true. However, people have an amazing capacity for being able to use things for other than they're supposed to. You could take a car, pack it full of explosives, and kill a bunch of people that way. I think some of the main causes for these people going on these shooting sprees, it stems from, in part, the economy. Also, you have, I think, a need to restructure the mental health care system in this country, particularly so that individuals like this hopefully could be able to get the help they need, and maybe those same healthcare professionals, if they spot somebody that is potentially dangerous, they could say something to the proper authorities so that maybe one of these kind of shootings could be stopped from happening in the future. I think people who do own firearms, especially if they have like kids in their home, or if they have somebody who's mentally ill that's living with them, they really need to make a decision on whether or not they are going to have a firearm in their house, or if they choose to, how they're going to properly store that and keep it secured so that they don't have access to it, whether or not they're kids or someone who has mental illness. Now that being said, sometimes too, I know that you don't see this stuff until after a person does something terrible like this. I've read and heard about that, where the people didn't know. They never would have figured someone would do something like this. Sometimes there's nothing that you can really do in that score. Because when you have someone that's like this, they are, generally from the reading I've done, what they do is very premeditated and planned out, sometimes up to like a year or more in advance. And with that kind of premeditation, like say in the Columbine shootings, Klebold and Harris, their main plan was to kill a majority of the students in that school with a couple of improvised propane bombs, and then pick off anybody trying to run out from the school. So it wasn't just the guns they used. Their intent was to use basically terrorist tactics. Aside from that, I also think that a major problem is our news media. Our news media loves to bilk and exploit things for sensationalism. They do a very good job of putting on these solemn, concerned faces and using the drama to keep people glued to the television. It's like the old thing about the train wreck. It's hard to look away. They take advantage of it. I also think that the news media is very good at basically giving these sick people partly what they want. When I've looked into reading about these people that do these shooters, a majority of the time their main motivation is revenge. Another big motivating factor for them is they want to be remembered for doing something horrible. And in that sense, the news media, they do a great job at giving them what they want, glorifying them, giving them their 15-20 minutes of fame. The news media also does not give very fair, balanced coverage of things. You notice recently in the news media what they seem to be focusing on for the most part. It's not just the crime that happened, but a lot of the drama and hysteria they're whipping up as a result, particularly trying to push and motivate people for gun control. And again, the people that support it, like I said, I think they're good people and they mean well. But I also think that they're allowing themselves to be propagandized and manipulated. Because as I've seen, it's not uncommon for a majority of news networks to lean towards gun control supporters. And also, too, if you notice, you don't hear too often in the news about people who use firearms to stop crimes or to protect people. Why is that? I would think somebody that actually saved someone else's life is a hero, and that should be mentioned. But you don't hear about that as much. I guess that saying about nothing sells quite like bad news. So I think that's part of the problem. But I think the worst problem from the research I've done into these shootings, it's the inaction of people at the time that knew these shooters. I'm talking about sometimes it's parents, sometimes it's not the parents, but friends who knew this person had reason to suspect that they might be a problem. You had teachers, professors, or parts of the school staff, mental health care professionals, lawmakers that failed to close loopholes in laws, and members of law enforcement that failed to do their jobs and consequently tried to cover things up to save their butts and protect themselves. Those are the real villains, people, not just the shooters, but basically the people that helped enable the shooters by not doing anything. And if you read into these different shooting instances, the trend is there. Look it up for yourself. Okay, in the case of the Columbine shooting, Klebold and Harris, a year before they were going to do this, they had submitted papers, they'd made a video bragging about it. The cops had known, particularly I believe it was Harris, had a police record. So there was concerns about them, no one acted. They even had a search warrant to search, I believe it was Harris's home, and they didn't use it. If they had, they probably would have stopped that shooting. In the case of the shooter out in Aurora, Colorado, at the Batman premiere, he was seeing a psychologist. Now I know that people can sit there and say, well, there's that client-patient privilege stuff, but you also heard the university offering the excuse that they couldn't do anything because he wasn't going to the school anymore. They couldn't have said anything to law enforcement that this person might have been potentially dangerous. Even, I mean, a psychologist or psychiatrist. And like I said, there might be that client doctor privilege thing, but still, if you have reason to suspect this person is dangerous, I think you would have a responsibility to try to make sure that they don't hurt anybody and that they get the help that they need. Alright. Now, in the case of Jared Loughner, the fellow that shot Congressman Harris, or Gifford, excuse me, and killed a federal judge. He had been kicked out of his community college for his behavior. Cops were concerned about him. I find it hard to believe that the parents couldn't have seen the way he was acting. I wasn't there in the house. I couldn't see it. Maybe they were in denial, but still, there were, again, the warning signs were there, and people didn't pay attention to them and they didn't act. In 1997, the Dunblane shooting over in England that spurred on their gun ban over there. There had been complaints about that shooter, Thomas Hamilton. He had gotten the ire of the parents. There were a lot of complaints about inappropriate, abusive conduct towards children. He had been involved with the Boy Scouts and had been running boys clubs, and there were real concerns about him being a pedophile. He had had the attention of the cops. He'd had a problem with one of the gun clubs over there, and one of the police officers had commented that his firearms permit should be revoked because of the concerns and the complaints about him, but they did nothing. Also, if you look into that, you'll notice there seems to be attempts by the cops over there to suppress information, to cover themselves, very similar to what happened at Columbine. So I feel very strongly that it's not the weapons. A huge part of the problem is the people that could speak up, could have done it, done something to try to help, and they didn't. So I mean, if we're going to be reforming laws, why don't we try to reform laws that can better empower law enforcement and mental health care professionals to stop these things from happening? I mean, it's easy to focus on the weapons, but the weapons aren't the problem. And I encourage you out there not only to research this for yourself, but also if you see somebody, you know somebody that you are concerned about, whether it's a family member, whether it's someone that you go to school with, tell someone. Whether it's you feel comfortable talking to a cop, talking to someone at your school, at your college, talk to someone, say something, because not only may you save that individual's life, you may also save the lives of a lot of people. And for those of you out there, if you do have firearms in your home, particularly, like I said before, if you have kids, or you may have people living, family members or other people living with you that may have some mental issues, I would also encourage you to really seriously think about whether or not you want to have firearms in your home, or how you're going to properly lock them up to make sure that they can't get access to them, if you haven't already. So anyway, that's my thoughts on the matter, and thank you for your time. Before I go, I'm also going to include some links down underneath that might be helpful for your own research. They were for me. So anyways, take care.